Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Mondays with Amanda. We have got some wonderful things in store today with our book study. Again, we are studying Rhythmic Movement Method by Dr. Harold Blumberg. This is the week we're talking about rhythmic movement, autism, and environmental stress. And we're going to talk about what he says in the book. So as you hop on, please say hi to me. Let me know if you're watching #live or #replay. I want to know who is here. Say hi to me. We'll get started here in just a couple minutes while everybody hops on and finds this live feed before I get into this. So this is going to be a lot of information, all right? And I'm going to show you a few other books that can be helpful in diving a little bit deeper in this subject today. But I'm so glad that you guys are here. I will be talking about this list of things. I have quite a few papers that I've written out, so we've got some great information today. You can always go back and watch this again. This will be in the guides section. So again, as you hop on, please say hi to me. Let me know who is here right now. Hi, Jen. Good to have you. Jen is one of our coaches in our coaching program. And she's my assistant. She's always here when I'm doing a live. So thank you, Jen. Thank you. All right. Hi, Mayrav. Good to see you as well. All right. So today we are talking about rhythmic movement, autism, and environmental stress. How many of you have kids on the spectrum? Let me know in the comment section. Just say me or I do. I'd like to know who's on today that has a child on the spectrum, or maybe they work with a child on the spectrum. Yeah, or they care for someone on the spectrum. Okay, good. Thanks, Mayrav. And I know Jen does. Good job. Okay, again, as you hop on, say hi to me. Give me some hearts. Let me know if you are excited to learn about rhythmic movement, autism, and environmental stress. All right. Yes. So if you want to be added to the tagging when we do a live, just let us know. There's actually a post in the announcements that you can add your name to, and then we add you. And so when we go live, because it's, Facebook is hit and miss. And if you don't have your notifications on, you might not even see when I go live. So we can tag you so you won't miss out. You'll be able to ask some questions at the end. I'm excited to go over this. So first off, we want to do our announcements and our wins, right? So we take the time to notice what's going well in our home, even if it's the smallest little thing. When we do that, we actually start seeing more of the good things that are happening because we are creating neural pathways to notice them, to pay attention to them. All right, so this is something intentionally that when we are raising uniquely wired kids, it's really, really powerful to begin looking for the wins, even the smallest little things, okay? And when we share them with our own kids and our families, we start to build up a family team, that we start to see one another's goodness, okay? Because we can focus on the negative or we can focus on the positive, okay? The negative will require and demand attention. The good things that happen oftentimes kind of go under the radar. So when you make an intention to look for those, to see those, to recognize those, it helps build up a family culture that is inspiring and encouraging and helps our kids become more independent. Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's live. Let me know if you're watching #live or #replay. I'm going to go over the announcements, and the announcements start off with the wins that we have. Now, each one of these wins that I've got on here are from families that are in the coaching program, so they have the opportunity each week to coach with me, Jen, and Candy. To be able to help them implement the things that we teach here in Whole Brain Connections in their families. So I'll be talking a little bit about that after today's presentation because we have some bonuses for those who sign up for coaching this week. Okay, Sarah Faust, she says, we had our first family meeting. Overall, it went well. My son stayed for a portion of the meeting and got to hear some of his wins that are on the board. So Sarah has been writing down the wins that she sees on a visible board in her home. That helps her remember the good things that happen, and that also shows her family that she's noticing them, and they can also start to begin to see the good things that are happening with them. Even if there's just the smallest thing, just a polite word, right? The opening of a door, the putting away of a toothbrush, right? The calming themselves down when they get, maybe a little upset. We just had a short introduction, stated some things we were grateful for. It's a start, and at least we are talking. Yeah. So for many of us, we don't have family meetings, right? And it might feel a little uncomfortable to start having these meetings where we talk about the good things that we see and we start communicating. But that's okay. When you start small and simple, it starts to build this family culture, this value of communicating and working through problems, seeing the wins. So congratulations, Sarah. One baby step at a time. Okay, Kirsten Williams said, we've been using a family contribution wheel for almost 2 weeks, and it has made a huge difference in our family prep, or in our dinner prep. Everyone spins the wheel to find out what they will do to contribute to getting dinner on the table. No more fighting or arguing to help out, and everyone is then already in the room when dinner is ready. In fact, the kids run when we say it's time to spin the wheel because they know it gives them a better chance of doing the responsibility that they actually want to do. It's nothing fancy, just a plastic oatmeal lid with a brad and a cardboard strip. So Kirsten figured out a way to help involve her kids with a little bit of randomness and sometimes some choice to help with dinner, right? To be part of that family team, so that everybody knows that at dinner time, this is what we do. And it's really important to start in very small ways to implement things like this in your family. These would be rules and routines. Even the smallest can be really, really helpful in reducing negative behavior, reducing kind of the struggle and fight at different times during the day. So awesome job, Kirsten. Okay, and our last one is Tiffany Barton. She says, my youngest daughter has been expressing herself more with language than just reacting. When she got mad at her sister, she stopped and actually used her words, telling her, hey, you took that. Now I'm mad. Give it back. Her sister even stopped and got excited that she used her words and told her, instead of just screaming, then grabbing her to get the toy back or hitting her. Or her little sister was really excited for her that she started using her words. We had a dance party to show her. That was awesome. Plus, it was a win for my other 2 kids who took part in acknowledging that their sister's win and celebrating it with her instead of being jealous. I've been doing a couple of the rhythmic movements on her in the morning, nap time, and before bedtime. She really enjoys it and will do it for over a minute now. Also doing different mindfulness activities and some sensory toys when she is calming down in her calming down room. Okay, so all of those are wonderful wins. Tiffany's implementing these rhythmic movements, and she's seeing a difference in her youngest child, in her ability to use language, and we'll talk about that today. Those rhythmic movements really help connect the language portion of the brain. So congratulations, Tiffany. All right, let's see where we're at now. I'm going to see if there's any questions. ADHD and behavior issues. Okay, so this still will be helpful for you. Last week we talked about ADHD, so if you didn't get to see that, go ahead and check in the guide section, and you can watch that one from last week. Yeah. And Jen just posted the link to get tagged. Thank you, Jen. Perfect. So if you have any questions about this, whether it's about autism or not, it's okay. You can ask your question because I can touch on other things in rhythmic movement. So today, again, we're reading from the book Rhythmic Movement Method by Dr. Harold Blomberg. He is by study, he's a psychiatrist. He just recently died, I think, in May. So he's been working with rhythmic movements since 1985 when he learned them from a physiologist named Kirsten Lindy, and started using it with his schizophrenic patients and with his other patients who had neurological challenges, including ADHD and autism. All right. All right, so for today, we're going to talk about the rhythmic movement, autism, and environmental stress, as well as we're going to talk about heavy metals, okay, and what some research has found in connection to autism. We're going to talk about electromagnetic frequencies, or these EMFs, okay. This is wireless devices, electronics, computers, iPads, these types of things. We're going to talk about food intolerances and the connection it has to autism, and how it can get in the way of the effectiveness of rhythmic movements. We're going to also talk about inflammation, okay, and some of these cytokines and exophenes, which I know is a lot of big words, but I'll explain those to you when we get to them. And last, we're going to actually talk about the rhythmic movements that help kids on the spectrum. Okay, I'm going to turn this. All right. So I missed one. Hold on. No. Sorry about that. I'm figuring out my own notes. So first off, we're going to talk about heavy metals, okay? So we consider these environmental stresses, things that are either put into the child or the child is exposed to or the child eats. So that would be these four things here, and how they might have a connection to autism and the struggles that autistic kids have. So I'm going to open up to page 136 on here. I'm going to read you a small portion of this. So if you have your book, of course, you can pull it out. I'm going to read this. According to academic medicine, autism is a chronic neurological disability with hereditary genetic causes. Okay. However, an increasing amount of research during the last 20 years shows that children develop autism because their immune system and detoxification abilities can no longer cope with the increasing environmental stress from vaccines, heavy metals, and other toxic substances that the child is exposed to, right? We live in a modern age where we have created a lot of amazing things that help us heal, keep our health strong, right? But some of these have unseen consequences for some of our kiddos. Okay. Recent study of 100 women. This is talking about amalgam. So amalgam here are basically the metal fillings in your mouth. And there's been some studies done that talk about the exposure that a fetus can get from these silver fillings. So it's become quite a practice these days to not use the amalgam fillings anymore. They use a porcelain filling. Number one, it's prettier in the mouth, as well as it's a little bit more expensive, but it also doesn't have that heavy metal toxin component to it in the mouth. So there was a study, and this is something that you can look into. In the back of the book, it has a list of all the studies. You can consider it for your family. This is something that is probably pretty controversial out there. I personally have my own personal opinion, but I just want to share what he has in here for you to consider and do your own research on, okay? A recent study of 100 women has shown that if a mother has more than 8 amalgam fillings, her child runs more than 4 times increased risk of developing autism than children of mothers without amalgam. And you can go back to, it's a Geiger in 2009 did a study on that, okay? So something to think about. if these heavy metals, and what happens is, as we'll learn about this, that because of certain things in the body, the cells have a really hard time actually getting rid of the heavy metals, right? So we're all exposed to heavy metals in our everyday life, but our cells know how to get rid of them. But for some kiddos that have this because of food and all sorts of things, their cells have a hard time getting rid of that heavy metal. And so many kids that are on the spectrum, when they do blood tests, some of them have high levels of specifically mercury and other heavy metals. Okay. All right. So that's this part. The electrical magnetic frequencies. I want to talk to you about that for just a second. Okay. So these EMFs, right? These things seem to affect kids with autism more than those with ADHD or other learning challenges, okay? But we also know that kids on the spectrum have more challenges neurologically, right? And so these are some of the things that they found have contributed to it. So let's go to page 143, and here's what it says. Let's see. In 2007, a group of 14 scientists published the Bioinitiative report, which was based on 1,500 studies of the effects of electromagnetic irradiation. They found that genes are damaged even by radiation below accepted safety standards, and they found extensive evidence that electromagnetic fields cause inflammation and allergies and weakens the immune system. Okay, so out of 1,500 studies, this group of scientists found that EMFs from wireless devices, from our wireless computers, cell phones, all of these things, wireless, now we have everything Google, right? All these wireless devices in our house actually have an effect, they found, on a child's inflammation, allergies, and it weakened the immune system. So this is something else to consider. Lots of information out there about that. Okay. All right, so we talked about heavy metals. We've also talked about electromagnetic frequencies. What this actually does is that it creates in the body these what are called free radicals, which also kind of mess with the cell, which reduces the ability for heavy metals to be pushed out of the cell and gotten out of the body. And it just, so that's an interesting connection there that you might want to look into. Okay, the biggest ones we're going to talk about today are food intolerances and the inflammation that comes from that. Okay. Some of you might be, well versed in this. Some of you may not. So let's talk about this. So when a child, oftentimes what they've found, especially Dr. Blomberg found, that as he was doing the rhythmic movements on kids, those that were on the spectrum actually had the benefits were slower when they were still eating gluten, casein, which is milk protein. Okay. And for many of his kids, as he really learned the power of rhythmic movement, before he would actually work with a child that was on the spectrum, he required that they have the child get off of gluten and casein because there wouldn't be enough benefit from the amount of work that they were doing with the rhythmic movement. And it took a lot longer. Okay. There's a lot of things out there these days that, especially with MSG and aspartame, which many of us already know this, right? MSG can cause neurological damage. It can cause epilepsy, right? Seizures. And same with aspartame. Like those are created in a lab. They're not naturally occurring. And so MSG is almost, illegal. I know you can still get it, but you'll see on all sorts of items and in restaurants that they no longer, their food's no longer made with MSG, specifically because it creates neurological damage. Okay. So for many kiddos that are gluten or casein intolerant, They did quite a few studies with kids on the spectrum, and kids on the spectrum were 3.5 times more likely to have celiac disease, which is actually a disease that makes it so you can't eat gluten. And celiac disease, you can actually do blood tests on that. You can actually do a biopsy and see, oh, this child, this individual has celiac disease. However, the largest majority is an intolerance to these particular items. And the way that you know that they're sensitive to these or have an intolerance is that they have improved behavior. They start to show more controlled in their behavior and in their social interactions and in their play. Okay, and we're going to talk about that. Food intolerances, these things here can also cause challenges in the gut and can create inflammation in the gut. Okay, I'm going to show you a couple books that would be helpful in this. Autism, A Path to Healing. This is written by Dr. Blomberg as well. So it goes into basically a holistic view of autism and talks about the environmental, the diet, and rhythmic movement. So if you have a child on the spectrum and you want to learn a little bit more about these items that I've outlined today, then get this book. This is a really wonderful book. I tend on the natural sides of things. So I homeschooled for over 20 years. I had 4 of my babies at home. Personally, I delayed vaccines because my own brother had reactions to it and my parents delayed them. So that's kind of like a cultural thing for us. Delay them till they're older, like in their teens. But we all have to, we all make the best decisions that we possibly can. And I know there's some contention out there between vaccine and anti-vaxxers and things like that. That's not at all what this conversation is, getting into very much, but it's something to consider and do your own research. There's lots and lots of research out there on that. Amanda Satwalker, you just connected all the dots in my life. Okay, so who is Facebook user that just said that? You might need to give me permission. In the post, it'll say, click on this. It'll give StreamYard permission for me to see your name. I'd love to know who that was. I'm glad you're making connections. I see some mind-blowing going on. Okay, so food intolerances. Okay, there's a number of things that happen, and this is really interesting when I was studying this. Fascinated by it. So there was a researcher named Carl Reichelt, and he did a study and talked about basically how gluten and casein, in the study of people that he was studying, that there was an increase in autism and schizophrenia. In those people that had autism and schizophrenia, they had some intolerances to gluten and casein. And when they took those things out of their diet, their symptoms improved. Okay, which I thought was amazing. What happens is, instead of when the bowels are inflamed and struggling to actually digest these, instead of breaking these down into amino acids, I know, don't lose me here. Don't leave. Amino acids, it actually create something called peptides. And he found these peptides in the urine of patients who had autism and schizophrenia. Okay. And these peptides actually are similar, have a similar effect as morphine. Okay. And what that means is that when there was an elevated level of peptides, because people couldn't break down the gluten casein, okay, here's some of the things that happened. They had reduced play and social interactions. Okay, these individuals with high peptides, they did self-harming behavior, and they had a reduced sensitivity to pain. So I thought that was fascinating. Okay, so when an individual has an intolerance to gluten and casein, means they can't break it down effectively, and it can create extra peptides. you can find in the urine. And those peptides have a similar effect as morphine, okay, which reduces a child or an individual's ability to play or socially interact. It can create self-harming behavior, obsessive behavior, as well as a reduction in the sensitivity to pain. So some of our uniquely wired kids react to pain differently, like they could hurt themselves and they don't even know it, right? So I thought that was really, really fascinating. Okay. The other thing that can happen with gluten and casein, he says in here and through these reports, is that it produces cytokines, which increases inflammation, not only in the gut, but also in the cerebellum, right? And as we've learned about rhythmic movements, as the brain matures, the cerebellum is actually able to make smooth, rhythmic, coordinated movements, right? And that just shows the building up of the brain. Well, if the cerebellum is inflamed, it's really hard for these kids to be rhythmic about the movements. In fact, some kids on the spectrum never until they stop eating the gluten and casein actually can make these movements actively themselves rhythmically. Okay. So like I said before, kids on the spectrum are 3.5 times more likely to have celiac disease. Okay. But also a high majority of them have intolerances to gluten and casein. Okay. What happens is that when they eat the gluten and casein, they actually have a regression of their a regression occurs. Okay, so it might mean that they might have more outbursts, more tantrums, less social interactions, right? These are things that kids on the spectrum already struggle with. And so these things here have been shown that as you take them out of the diet, there's increased social interaction, increase in communication, increase in play. Okay. I want to read a study on page 141. Cool. Also, Allie. Good. I'm glad. I made some connections for you, Allie. Allie's also in the coaching program. Okay, so let's see. Page 141. I'm going to read a study. It's on page 141. It says, in a Norwegian study from 2002, 20 autistic children underwent developmental and behavioral testing. Half of the children were put on a gluten and casein-free diet for 1 year, after which the tests were repeated. The children in the diet group showed significant improvement, while there was no change in the control group. Okay, kiddos that were taken off of gluten and casein for a year had significant improvement in their behavior and developmental testing. Okay, and this other one here is a Scanbrit study. They did 72 Danish autistic children from 4 to 10 years of age, were tested and randomly assigned to a diet or a non-diet group. Okay. So the diet group would mean they reduced the gluten and casein in the diet, and then the non-diet group just ate normal, just the way they always have. After 12 months, the tests were repeated, and the results showed clinical improvement in the children on a diet compared to the other group. Their attention improved. They became less aggressive, less hyperactive, started to talk more. So those were 4 of the main improvements that happened for these kiddos that were taken off of gluten and casein. Many of the children got rid of their allergies, and in several of them, epileptic seizures diminished. The conclusion was that the diet helped 2/3 of the children. Okay, so for those who were on the diet, 2/3 of them had dramatic improvements. Okay, so it's something to consider with your kiddo. And we have in our coaching group, we have quite a few families that already have implemented that because they've just over time figured out we've got to take gluten out. Let's take milk out, because sometimes these kids, as soon as they eat them, that they start having negative behaviors. Okay. The other thing that I thought was really interesting, remember when I said when you can't digest the gluten and casein, there's more peptides. Those peptides you can find in the urine, and they kind of mimic morphine, right? And the pleasure that comes from morphine. And so sometimes some kiddos prefer to just eat gluten and casein because those added peptides in their system kind of give them a good feeling, like it just feels good. So that was an interesting connection he made there in the study. So let's talk about, we talked about the inflammation here. Okay. We talked about the cytokines. Okay. We talked about the exorphins. This is the peptides that mimic morphine, and then glutamate. Okay. Same thing. When an individual can't break down the gluten and the casein, they have an added amount of glutamates in the system. Now, glutamates are basically, let me see if I have it on this side. No. So glutamates is one of the most prevalent neurotransmitters, right? So in our brain, we have all these nerve networks. The way that they communicate is there are neurotransmitters, okay? And those are, that can be dopamine, that can be serotonin. These are the, I would say fluids, it's not the right word, but that's what helps the communication happen, okay? Now, glutamate is an excitatory. Let me look this up really quick here. I have it written down on my things. Okay, so this particular neurotransmitter creates an active, excited kind of communication in the brain, all right? But what also happens to glutamate is it gets transformed into GABA. And GABA actually reduces the amount of neurotransmitters in the brain so that you can calm yourself down, okay? And in kiddos that have a hard time digesting these, they have lots of glutamate and it's not being transferred into GABA in the brain. And so they stay in this elevated, excited, state that can be really challenging for their behavior, for the family, for learning, right? For getting along. Something else that was really interesting was rhythmic movement. Okay, so we talked about these environmental stresses, the inflammation. We talked about some of these things within the body that can cause some of these behavior challenges or the stresses on the body. We're going to now talk about rhythmic movements, okay, and how they can help. Okay, benefits of rhythmic movements. Okay, so we're going to talk about this. Rhythmic movements in kiddos on the spectrum create relaxation and they calm the nervous system. Okay, if the for some kiddos that are still eating gluten and casein, it can actually overstimulate them. Okay, so you might have a child who can't, either because of tactile, because of sensory things, or the movement is just too much and it gets them overstimulated, then you have to do the rhythmic movements a little bit differently. Okay, you have to start slower and smaller movements. And we've talked about this before for some of our kiddos, and Jen did this with her son. She actually pushed on the bed or rocked the bed because her son really didn't tolerate her touching him while she was doing the movements. Okay, so I'm going to actually show you a video. I'm going to show you the video of the rolling of the bottom rhythmic movement. This is one that I teach in the workshop, so I thought I'll show it to you guys. So those of you who are not in the group that has access to all of the rhythmic movements, or if you haven't watched the workshop on sensory movements, I'm going to show you this one here. I'm going to share my screen. Let's see. All right, so hopefully you guys can see this. Okay, this is the sensory movement mini course. So I'm going to have you guys watch this here. Hello, this is rhythmic movement number 5, passive rolling of the bottom in prone position. Okay, Libby, can you go ahead and lay on your belly? There you go. And she's going to stack her hands and put her forehead on her hands, okay? For some kids, if their legs aren't relaxed onto the ground, okay, they're more like up and stiff, you can give them a pillow to put underneath their legs if that's more comfortable. So we're going to show that as a possibility, but only, you know, if there seems to be some stiffness and tenseness down here in the lower extremities, okay? All right, so we're going to roll the bottom, and here's a couple ways you can do it. You can do it from here on the top, or holding onto the waistband, okay? You can also push it, and you can pull it. So I'm going to ask Libby. Libby, what do you prefer? Okay, so she likes it on the waistband. And I want you to notice that her armpits are pretty close to the mat, all right? So some kids might be really tensed up, and so their shoulders might be up, so you want to help them relax those down, okay? And then you're going to do the waistband here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we're going to pause. Notice what you feel inside. You're saying that to your child, and they don't need to respond. Notice how you're holding your child. Okay, if you're in a relaxed state as well. So a little bit more movement. You can sing or recite a poem or nursery rhymes like I did in one of the other movements. Notice if the shoulders are moving a lot, and if there's a lot of ancillary movement up here, you can put your hand on the shoulders to help keep that still. You're really wanting the movement just to be here in the bottom area. This is helping to have separation between the lower and the upper part of the body. Okay, notice what you feel inside. Make sure that everyone's breathing. Now, over time, as your child matures, their brain matures, they're going to be able to start doing these movements by themselves. So I'm going to ask Libby, just as an example, can you go ahead and rock your bottom back, roll your bottom back and forth, all by yourself? So I want you to notice that the input is really important when we're doing any of these rhythmic movements. We want them to be smooth, symmetrical, so you want to be rolling as much to the left as to the right, okay? And as you can see, Libby's able to maintain this smooth rolling for a good amount of time here, okay? Oftentimes kids with on the spectrum or have active reflexes, might have attention challenges, will have a hard time doing any of these movements rhythmically by themselves. And so it's really important that we're giving this input. Okay, you can stop the beat. There you go. Just notice what it feels like on the inside. You want that smooth input, okay, and rhythmic and even, right? It's going to help mature the cerebellum, brainstem. It's going to gain access to the prefrontal cortex and the language areas of the brain. That's why kiddos who do these consistently start to communicate better,
start to socially engage better. This particular movement as well can release trauma. So if you have a child who might have had some trauma in their past, this might not be the one you want to start with. Okay, just
Okay, so I'm hearing that you guys couldn't hear that very well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show the first part one more time, and I think I didn't tick the sound part on it. So let me share screen. Um, hmm. Oh, there it is. Okay. Let's go ahead and share this video one more time. Okay, so hopefully you can hear this better.
Hello, this is rhythmic movement number 5, passive rolling of the bottom in prone position. Okay, Libby, can you go ahead and lay on your belly?
there you go.
There you go.
And
And she's going to stick her hands and put her forehead on her hands, okay? For some kids, if their legs aren't relaxed onto the ground, okay, they're more like up and stiff, you can give them a pillow to put underneath their legs if that's more comfortable. So we're going to show that as a possibility, but only, if there seems to be some stiffness and tenseness down here in the lower extremities, okay? All right, so we're going to roll the bottom, and here's a couple ways you can do it. You can do it from here on the top, or holding onto the waistband, okay? You can also push it, and you can pull it. So I'm going to ask Libby. Libby, what do you prefer?
Waistband.
Okay, so she likes it on the waistband. And I want you to notice that her armpits are pretty close to the mat, all right? So some kids might be really tensed up, and so their shoulders might be up, so you want to help them relax those down, okay? And then you're going to, we're going to do the waistband here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now we're going to pause. Notice what you feel inside. And you're saying that to your child, and they don't need to respond. Notice how you're holding your child, okay, if you're in a relaxed state as well. A little bit more movement. You can sing or recite a poem or nursery rhymes like I did in one of the other movements. Okay. Notice if the shoulders are moving a lot, and if there's a lot of ancillary movement up here, you can put your hand on the shoulders to help keep that still. You're really wanting the movement just to be here in the bottom area. This is helping to have separation between the lower and the upper part of the body. Good. Okay, and notice what you feel inside. Make sure that everyone's breathing. Good. Now, over time, as your child matures, their brain matures, they're going to be able to start doing these movements by themselves. So I'm going to ask Libby, just as an example, can you go ahead and rock your bottom back, roll your bottom back and forth? All by yourself. So I want you to notice that the input is really important when we're doing any of these rhythmic movements. We want them to be smooth, symmetrical. So you want to be rolling as much to the left as to the right, okay? And as you can see, Libby's able to maintain this smooth rolling for a good amount of time here, okay? Oftentimes kids with on the spectrum or have active reflexes might have attention challenges. will have a hard time doing any of these movements rhythmically by themselves. And so it's really important that we're giving this input. Okay, you can stop, Libby. There you go. And just notice what it feels like on the inside. You want that smooth input, okay, and rhythmic and even, right? That's going to help mature the cerebellum, the brainstem. It's going to gain access to the prefrontal cortex and the language areas of the brain. That's why kiddos who do these consistently start to communicate better, start to socially engage better. This particular movement as well.
Okay, I hope you guys could hear that better. Thanks for your patience. Okay, I will also post that here in the group, that one video, so you guys can look at that another time if you want to refer back to that. So let's talk about that. That's the movement that I teach initially. And this is the same movement that Coach Candy, who's an occupational therapist in the group, she has been using with all of her clients, just that one move. And last Friday, we had the live workshop for the sensory movement mini course. And she went over the statistics and some of the case studies of the clients that she's working with and the improvements and in what area. So this is 5 minutes a day with that rolling of the bottom at home with the parents. So every day. For some of our kids, like we said before, they might be sensitive. The vestibular system, their balance system in their ears might be highly sensitive. And so they can only take a tiny bit of input. That's okay. What you can do is try it just giving a tiny bit of input a little bit every day. All right. We want these to be comfortable. We want the children to enjoy them. And actually, most kids want the rhythmic movements because they calm the nervous system. In fact, I was just doing them last night with my daughter. She's 15 and a half. She's my uniquely wired daughter. She started volleyball and has some really stiff muscles. And so I said, hey, let's do a rhythmic movement on your back, because when you calm the nervous system, and that's what these movements do as well, it also calms the muscles in the body so they're not as tight. So when she laid on her back and was doing a little bit of a movement, she's like, wow, that's really calming me down. And then she was able to stretch a little bit deeper. Okay. So these are wonderful when the body's feeling stressed, when you might feel overwhelmed. So these are movements you could do as an adult that are really powerful. Okay. All right. So these rhythmic movements, they calm the nervous system. The cerebellum is connected to the language portion of the brain. And as you do these movements, like I said, communication improves. Okay. The movements also stimulate the prefrontal cortex, okay, which improves impulse control, empathy, judgment, and endurance. Okay. When kids learn to do the rolling of the bottom and the windscreen wipers, which is another one, actively, when they're able to do these areas really, really improve. Okay. Another benefit of rhythmic movement is emotional attachment. So you might find that your kids actually want to sit on your lap. They might want to be cuddle. They might want to be physically close to you. If you had a child who does not like to be touched, these rhythmic movements for many kids create emotional attachment. They diminish compulsive behavior. So if you have kids who have stimming behavior or kind of ritualistic or compulsive behavior, they found in the rhythmic movements that these diminished as well. And then there was an increase in play with kids that were doing the rhythmic movement. Okay. All right. So I just showed you the rolling of the bottom in prone on the belly. Okay. When this is done passively and when it's done passive and active. Okay. When the rhythmic movements are passive, like I said, the emotions will develop. They'll show more emotional attachment, right? We talked about your child might want to start sitting on your lap or cuddling or wanting hugs. Okay. They increase in play and social interaction. Jen Chase shared that last week that her son, who's been doing these movements for the last year, who's on the spectrum, they went to the park last week. He saw a friend of his. He's never done this before. Grabbed his friend's hand and went to go play. So he never interacted really with any other child socially. And there's an increase in empathy. Okay. When the child does these actively, so as the cerebellum matures and your child is able to do these movements actively, it stimulates the prefrontal cortex and it improves impulse control, language development, judgment, and actually the physical endurance improves. And part of the reason for that is that the brain is getting the stimulation and the sensory system is integrating better so that the input from the muscles and the joints improves and it can start building the actual muscles of the body. So the child has more physical endurance. Awesome. Jen says, my son started the rhythmic movement with his teddy bear. Oh, that's awesome. And do you know offhand how many rhythmic movements he teaches in the book? Yeah, let me tell you. There is 6, 7, 8, 9. Well, for the rhythmic movements, there's 2 more. Then he has a crawling movement and then some reflex integration movements. Okay, so those aren't rhythmic. They're, well, some of them are. They're specifically for integrating the reflexes. Okay, so there's 2 more rhythmic movements. Okay. Okay, so now let's talk about how you can get some more support. Okay, so we talked about the rhythmic movement, we talked about the environmental stress, the connection to autism, the food intolerances, so really looking into gluten-free, dairy-free diets for kids on the spectrum have shown results of really improving all of these behaviors across the board that they struggle with. So lastly, last Friday we did the live workshop. There's a couple resources available to you. Number 1, we did the live workshop for the sensory movement mini course where we taught rhythmic movements as well as poses. We taught 6 of them, and you're welcome to have access to that. Jen, if you have that link, that would be awesome to post that link here. So you can go ahead and purchase that so you have lifetime access to it. In fact, let me quickly share the screen. And I'll show you. So here is the actual this is the sensory movement mini course, okay? And inside of here, it has the full workshop, all the movements, okay? So that you can refer back to the movements, you can watch the full workshop. And it was both presented by me as well as Candy, one of our other coaches. Okay. So if you're interested in watching that full workshop, let's see. Perfect. The other thing is this week we actually have a bonus. So those that came to the sensory movement mini course, we invited them to continue working with us in the coaching program. So if you want more support and help along this path, we have the Family Thrive coaching. Okay, and this week, if you join the monthly or you buy the yearly, there are 4 bonuses. If you buy the monthly coaching, you get to pick one of these bonuses. If you end up paying for an entire year, you get all 4 of these. So let me talk about these bonuses, okay? As well, when you join the coaching, you actually have access also to the sensory movement mini course. So you could purchase the sensory movement mini course, Or you can join coaching, have that extra support. There's 3 coaching calls a week, so whichever one would fit your schedule. And you have access to the sensory movement mini course. Okay. But here are the bonuses, and we'll post them this week. It ends Thursday at midnight. Number 1, I'm creating a primitive reflex testing video. Okay, I'm going to make a video that you can follow and test your own child or yourself for primitive reflexes. We've talked about the rhythmic movements help integrate those primitive reflexes so that we have our, the body develops into these postural reflexes, so we're coordinated and we feel, normal in our skin. Our body works well, right? We're able to sit in a chair and learn. We're able to be able to play more with kids and uneven surfaces, right? There's just more confidence, body confidence. So the primitive reflex testing video, you also get a one-on-one coaching call with me or Candy to review those testings. Okay, so that you get a call with us. We also have the peaceful bedtime routine builder that Jen created. So this helps you build a bedtime routine that would include the rhythmic movements so that your kids can start sleeping well and sleeping through the night. And the last one is that DIY sensory path template. So that's where you can make your own sensory pathway in your home, in your school, maybe in your classroom. So it has all the instructions and the different activities that you would put on the floor to help integrate the sensory system, help improve attention and emotional regulation for kids. Okay, and these are really, really fun. Okay, so this week, again, like I said, if you sign up for the year, you get 2 months free and you get all 4 of these bonuses. And then if you decide to just sign up for month to month, then you get to pick one of these. And so you just need to let us know, message us. Once you sign up, just message us which one you would like, and we can get that to you. Yeah, so Jen posted the sales page. Perfect. You can just go in there and join the Family Connections Thrive Academy and get continued help. We can coach you through these movements and help you adjust them, help answer your questions. This Friday, we actually have rhythmic movement coaching. So on Friday with Candy and I, we will be answering questions specifically in regard to working with your child with rhythmic movements. Okay, so we have 2 coaching calls this week, as well as that 3rd one on Friday for the rhythmic movements. Okay, so let me see if there's any other questions here. Okay, I know this is a lot of information, but I was really tickled to be able to share this with you. I learned so much more. If you've not gotten this book, I highly recommend getting it and studying it. If you feel like or have already had some benefits in using these rhythmic movements, this is an inspiring book and it's really helpful. You can get this book and learn all the movements. The other one I wanted to show you again was the Autism, A Path to Healing. So this one is also written by Dr. Blomberg. Talks about the environmental stress, food intolerances, as well as rhythmic movement. And the last thing I wanted to show you was this book. This is called GAPS. It's called the GAPS Diet, Gut and Psychology Syndrome. So this is a book written by Natasha McBride. I actually had her as a guest on the Raising Uniquely Wired Kids conference. So when you join the coaching program, you also have access to the interview that I did with Dr. Natasha McBride on this GAPS diet. So this diet helps heal the gut, reduce inflammation, and help reduce the glutamate. So those things that are causing challenges in our kids because the gut and the brain have some inflammation. This is the diet that she helps kids and families take on. It's actually a very simple, holistic diet, but it helps with autism and ADHD, dyslexia, schizophrenia, depression, dyspraxia. So it's a really, really powerful book. So it's called Gut and Psychology Syndrome. If you want to actually know how to change the diet, this is it. Okay, let's see if there's any other questions. Nope. Thanks for tagging all those people that wanted to be tagged, Jen. Awesome. Okay. Thank you for joining me today. Next week, we're going to be talking about rhythmic movement and learning challenges, learning differences. So we're going to learn how rhythmic movements can help connect the learning centers of the brain so that our children can learn more effortlessly. So it's not so hard for them to learn. This is why I got into rhythmic movements and this movement journey with my daughter. That was really what she was struggling with, was behavior outbursts, attention, and especially learning difficulties. So next week, we're going to talk about the connection between that. And I look forward to seeing you. If you have any other questions, let me know. Just tag me here in this video and I will answer your questions. I want you to make sure that you understand what we taught today and if there's anything else that you need for support. Again, if you would like more long-term coaching and help with your child and your family, you can join the coaching program. You get one of these bonuses or all of these bonuses depending on how you go ahead and pay for it. And the bonuses end Thursday at midnight. So we will keep letting you know and reminding you. If you have any questions about the coaching, then please message me or reach out to me and tag me, and I'll be happy to answer those questions. Okay. All right. I'm Amanda Walker. I'm a learning and development coach. It was so great to be with you today. I hope you feel inspired. I hope you take a little bit of action to begin rhythmic movements that I showed you. Start researching some of these other things we talked about that might be part of your child's challenges. Okay, and with that, I say goodbye. Have a great week.